I don't know much about it except for I saw Jamie Oliver do an episode with the Navajo. And so he's hanging out with the Navajo in Arizona in the desert on a reservation. And he's like, it is, you can't see it because it looks sunny, but it's like, it's bitterly, bitterly cold out here.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not a lot there in terms of ground cover or fauna, trees, things that would be able to retain or hold heat. It just dissipates and disappears really quickly. Whereas where I live now in North Carolina, there are massive tall trees. We're close to the ocean. And so there's a lot more kind of like mediating effects for weather for sure.
There you go. And people said talking about the weather's boring, but we'll dig into more stuff. We're live everywhere. And so welcome back to the Coaches to the Moon podcast, ladies and gentlemen. This lion of a man in front of me is Michael S. Seaver. He is a executive coach. He's a podcast host. He's a speaker. He's an author of a brand new book. Well, not that new anymore, but called I Know, which is sitting behind you there and on your desk. Thanks for the plug. And I'm really excited to talk to you today. Michael, you've got a really unique perspective on a lot of stuff, man. So thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I was listening to your book this morning on my walk.
Right on.
Yeah, it's really, congratulations. It's a great book. I'm an audio book guy, on my daily walks. So you narrated it yourself. You've read it very well. And
yeah, thank you.
How did you like the process of recording your own book?
It was the first time I had ever done anything like that. And so for 12 and a half hours, I stood in what was effectively a phone booth and read through every single chapter. And it was a really fun and unique experience for me because I've never done it. And it was kind of like a test of endurance.
Yeah.
Like how well can you stay in character as you're trying to read tonalities and trying to read emotion inside of some pieces of my story, which are pretty heavy. And so it was a really fun experience, and maybe I'll do more of it in the future. Yeah,
it is. I'm only kind of in the first, couple chapters of your book, and there is some emotion in there. There's like a pretty low point in your life. You're on the floor, kind of heavy depression and kind of contemplating ending it really. And that sucks. Yeah. And then your cat Cleopatra comes and lies on your chest. And you said your cat was not an emotional, available cat. And and it's so funny, man, because we had cats my whole life growing up, and my cat Mango was, 20 years old, and in layman's terms, fucked. She was, everything was falling apart, and she, she was definitely, on her way out, and we had an appointment scheduled to put her to sleep. And this cat, who hated everyone, the night before, jumped on the couch and sat on my lap. And they know there's something, the animals always know, right?
There's definitely an inner knowing or an intuition that they have that humans don't understand. And I certainly, even to this day, years later, do not understand exactly what it was that I was thinking, feeling. And I know in a human sense what I was thinking and feeling, but what it was that she was able to pick up on, come over to my chest, lie on me, and purr, right, with a resonance that said, okay, maybe I should stay. Maybe my calling is bigger than I can currently see right now. But animals just have these intuitive gifts that we don't yet.
Well, thank goodness you did that, man, because we're very blessed to have you here today. And it's a great book. And you look very healthy and happy. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
So, dude, in your book, you spoke a lot about initially you worked for your grandfather, your father's landscaping business, and your grandfather was very successful in it. And then your father carried it on, and they kind of expected you to continue on with this work. I was in a similar position. I had a pretty successful dad with a business and everything. Now, coaching that I got into and you got into, it's an industry a lot of people still don't really understand, especially people with a more traditional career mindset. Now, a lot of people will get pushback as well from their families when they say, I'm going to be a coach, especially if they expect you to work in the family business. So do you have any advice for people who are wanting to follow that coaching path and they maybe feel some pressure from their parents and people around them to follow in their footsteps?
Yeah, I think, and it's a great question, Alex. I think one of the things we have to take a step back and remember is that our parents were acculturated to believe specific things at a very different time in human history, right? So you think back to my parents and my grandparents, probably the same for you, is that The internet wasn't yet developed. Geographically, they lived in very limited environments and had very, very small kind of jobs instead of a community, if you will. The economy was much smaller than it is today. There was less focus on spiritual growth and expansion back then. And I think back then there was a big focus on what's called idolatry, right? Which is this idea of we idolize particular people, celebrities, politicians, athletes, all this and that. And knowing that that was kind of the environment in which they were raised, it helps us to respect and honor and thank our parents for the ways that they raised us, doing the best that they possibly could at that particular point in time. But it's also important to begin having conversations with your family or with your parents about how radically the world has changed, evolved, and expanded, just so they can understand, right, that there's things are a lot different from their younger years to our younger years. And also it's important, I think, to have the discussion with them to say, I'm still trying to create financial security for myself the same way that you did when you were in your 20s and 30s too, right? So draw those parallels between yourself and them. And then I think one of the really important things that you can say or do is help them understand that this is a logical growth and progression of society or of the human race, right? So what it is that we're trying to do as coaches is like the next step in the evolution of what previous generations built. Right. And I really mean that. I really think that's important. So oftentimes, like, we're told by a family to go get a traditional university degree, but you can go get a formal coaching education from an ICF accredited school that has probably as much weight as a university degree. Right. And I think that's important. Or if you think about getting a human resources or an accounting or a finance certification, well, you can get a certification in personality assessments, right? I'm certified to use the DISC and some other emotional intelligence and motivations assessments, and they have a lot of weight, especially in our marketplace. Or, if you're accustomed to going and getting an internship, well, why not get some sort of an apprenticeship or a part-time job with a coaching or a consulting firm that gives you revenue, gives you personal money, but is still helping you grow and develop? So I think there's something to be said for helping people, especially with our parents, honor the differences between the environment they were raised in and the one we were raised in, thanking them and letting them know, right, that we're trying to create the same level of financial security for ourselves that they did for them, and that we're just carrying on this expanse that exists within the human race. So I think there's a couple ways that we can approach it to help them feel safe and to stand in our truths too.
Making them feel safe is a really important part of it, right? It's they're never doing this out of spite or out of ego. It is literally out of wanting the best for you. Now, as a new dad myself, I like to think of how I will react when my daughters give me big life decisions, but you never know until it's in front of you, right? So that's great. Yeah, the generational gap's massive. I still can't get my dad to buy any Bitcoin. still doesn't get it. But when I was first in coaching, I used to own, I know you came through hospitality as well, and I used to own a cafe, and I worked in hospitality for about 12 years. And my dad, when I was in my first, maybe 3 years of coaching, he was literally offering me money to buy me a food truck. He's like, food truck, brick and mortar. Customers come in, you get the money, and then they go out. He could see that picture because he had a travel agency back in the day before the internet. Customers come in, they give you money, and they leave again. And so it made a lot of sense. And the coaching model, the internet, it didn't make heaps of sense to me at the time. But I think these days it's becoming more and more common. I think soon it'll be like having a personal trainer, right?
For sure. Yeah, it's just like coaching as an industry is kind of at its infancy in terms of stages. Like, eventually, over many decades of time, human resources professionals developed the HRCI or the SHRM certifications. Or in accounting, it took them a while, but they became certified to be a CPA. Or and there are other, in finance, there's many, but you can become a certified financial professional. And so in the coming decades, coaching will carry the same weight that those professions do in those other industries. But it's hard when our parents use their own old mental models to project an image of what they think we should do based on their own experiences and success, right? And that's quite normal. Like my grandfather and father certainly expected that of me, but my level of success has transcended anything that they have ever done, because I have been able to impact a lot of lives in a very different way that wasn't cutting grass, shoveling dirt, or plowing snow.
Yeah.
Right. And so a very, very different context, but just understanding that parents have a desire to create safety and security for their children, but the lens by which they normally do it is by saying, here are the lessons I've learned. You should take those exact same things forward. But that's not how society works, right? The child is actually the parent's teacher. And the parent should be really looking at the child as though I should be expanding and learning from this person's knowledge and experiences too. But we're, as a society, slowly catching up to that belief pattern or structure.
Wow. What a interesting flip. The child is the parent's teacher. I think that happens a lot without us really realizing it. I can picture myself stopping and thinking about a lot of your answers in this podcast. So anyone listening, if there's a few moments of silence after Michael answers a question, that's me processing because we think very differently, you and I. You've got a lot. When I was listening to your book, you're so deep on emotional intelligence and the zodiac and all this really cool stuff. It's not in my radar, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about it. But one thing that we can agree on is we both worked in hospitality for a little bit. So firstly, what did you do in hospitality when you moved to Arizona?
I first got to Arizona. Within a couple of weeks, I was working as a front desk agent at the Four Seasons Resort in North Scottsdale. So checking people in, checking them out.
Yep. Hotels, people, meeting all sorts of people all day, every day. Shift work. Yeah, fantastic. So what was the best thing about hospitality for you?
I think there were a couple of things that were really meaningful for me as I reflect back on that time, because I did it for about 4.5 or 5 years. And the first thing I think was I was raised in such a small town in Michigan. It was 2,500 people that were predominantly like me. And when I went to the Four Seasons, there was 12 or 13 different countries represented in the employee base. And then there were people from all over the world that would come. Yeah. And that was really important for me to see and meet and have really, really deep and meaningful relationships. And those conversations and those relationships completely expanded the way I viewed the world. And that helped me, right? The lesson that I learned from that was that my way is not the only way, and it's not the right way. And on earth, there's 8 billion people. So there's 8 billion different interpretations of what right or wrong is or are. So I realized, especially as a coach today, that I can't tell someone what to do. I can only ask them questions that trigger some sort of underlying why or motivation for them to then be inspired to take action, right? So the first thing, definitely relationships. Number two, and this is really inherent to the Four Seasons and maybe the Ritz-Carlton, is that they really, as an employee, they really teach you to anticipate someone else's needs. And so that really taught me at a young age, how can I pay attention to the words that they choose, the tone of their voice, the body language? And that helped me to really understand what they wanted, because what they were saying wasn't really what they wanted, right? But if you pick up all these different things together, you could really figure out what they want. And so now as a coach, I spend a lot of time listening to what's not being said, right? Mm-hmm. So picking up on nonverbal cues, picking up tone of voice, understanding contextual things around them, that's really important. And a third and last thing that I'll reference, Alex, is that the Four Seasons taught us a very scripted, a very kind, a very supportive language for how we would interact with the guests. And I remember one time I asked a guest who was coming to the pool. I was just doing some work by the pool. And I said something to the effect of, well, are you going to be alone? And that was a big no-no. I shouldn't have said that. I should have said, will anyone be joining you? Right. And I didn't know, I was learning. And so what I really wanted to understand, or what I was learning back then, was that I don't know 99.9% of what's happening in this person's life. So if I can find a way then and now to use very different and uplifting and supportive language, I can always remember or understand that that person is doing the absolute best that they can considering their life circumstances. And so I was very young. I was very naive. It was a very, very expansive time in my life back when I was working in hospitality. But I'm so thankful for the relationships, the ability to anticipate someone's needs, or even just like really understanding the value of kind and supportive language. Wow. Yeah, it definitely. I 100% agree with my hospitality experience. I spent a lot of time in the kitchen, which gives me work ethic, ability to work under pressure, and to be in a close-knit team and to know that kind of what happens during service stays during service. Like things said during the heat of the moment don't always mean they think that way about you. But when I went into front of house and I ran my cafe and I was a waiter and a sommelier, that sort of thing, definitely, relationships
and the ability to just talk to a wide range of people, to be a waiter and to leave a table and have everyone kind of chuckle, to be able to close off a conversation well, is a massive, massive skill. I've said to my wife from day one, I've got to get our kids working in some sort of cafe, restaurant environment, even if it's front desk at McDonald's. I think it's a fantastic idea to have anyone do a bit of hospitality time and learn how to talk to people. It's clearly helps you in your career massively.
Oh, big time. I'm so thankful. And, my mom still to this day, even before I was born, my mom worked as a waitress or a server in the small town in which I was raised. And still to this day, in her mid 60s, she still does it because she loves the interaction with people. And so I definitely learned a ton from my mom about being in the service of others, but also the relationships and the connectivity to your community when you do it. So kudos to you, man, for thinking about getting your kids involved in that too, because generationally for me, it's been a pretty big part of my life.
Yeah, I love people too. My dad retired maybe 20 years ago, and he recently started driving Uber to hang out with more people, just to have conversations with more people.
That's awesome.
Day. And he'll sit at home, he'll be watching the cricket. That's what we do in Australia. And he'll have his phone there. And if it pings and he's got a trip, he's like, I'm out. And sometimes he'll be out for 20 minutes. Sometimes he'll be gone for the whole day and have all these interesting stories. I had a rabbit in my car today, just loves people like your mum, So yeah, good for her, man. Good for her.
Yeah, that's cool.
Tough gig, a lot of work on your feet. So we seem to be going across a little progression here. We started off with the family business. We've gone through to your years in hospitality. And then you started coaching. You had some success, one-on-one coaching. But then moving forwards, you got to a point where a lot of us coaches get to, which is you want to leverage your time out a little more. You realize that coaching really isn't scalable to $1 million business realistically, if you're just doing one-to-one coaching on the phone sessions, that sort of thing. But when you went to group coaching and online, it didn't work out the way you thought. You had a pretty big financial downslide, to put it lightly. It didn't quite pull it off the way you wanted to initially. So I'm just literally looking for any practical advice you can give people looking to leverage into a group coaching model so that they don't potentially make the same mistakes you did.
Yeah, I'm really glad that those experiences occurred for me, because now the counsel that I can pay forward to other coaches and people around the world is so much more deep and profound. And there are coaches, I know one in Phoenix, Arizona, who does charge $1 million per person. So if you do want to make millions of dollars, you can, as a coach, make millions of dollars. You just have to be in the right circles to allow for that to occur. But I'd realized that really wasn't my path. And there were some things that I wasn't truly clear on kind of comparing the in-person executive that I was serving versus the online person that I was trying to get to. So one of the lessons that I learned through the process of trying to shift from, in-person one-to-one or in-person group into something that was online is that I was far too broad in selecting the avatar of the ideal client, right? I initially thought to myself, okay, it's anybody who's disengaged or unhappy in some area of their life. And that was far too broad, although true in some context. So what I had to get to this point of understanding was that my ideal client is actually an introvert who's an executive who enjoys a more spiritual component to his or her life. And so when I got to that level of depth, the understanding was for me that the online course wasn't going to be as interesting to them, right? The in-depth conversation, sitting in a circle, being in a team meeting, that was going to be the vehicle by which they were going to learn the most. And that was important. And I think when I looked at my ideal client, I was also, number two, wrong in thinking about that these executives would desire and or would make time for the actual completion of the online course. And as I've come to experience in those, kind of the year and some change since, like they certainly have not. So I had to be very mindful of is that when you get to that avatar of that ideal client, do they prefer to learn one-to-one? Do they prefer to learn small group? Do they prefer to learn online? Is it a book? Is it a podcast? And I didn't do the appropriate research to get clear on what that was going to be, right? So the research there is absolutely critical. And a third thing is that in that moment of trying to make that transition, I subjugated my personal strengths to the choice of trying to make money, right? I forgot my strengths, which are listening, being able to connect the dots for people in a way that they can't for themselves, or being able to engage in the moment in a very authentic, deep way that's meaningful to people in the human experience. And because I wasn't doing those things via the online course, it was very easy for people to not buy it, right? So the things that I was known for in the marketplace, you can't parlay into an online course. And so that's, for me, is to understand that the online courses for me aren't necessarily going to sell, but that doesn't mean that they won't for another coach. I have to be mindful, and I have to offer the suggestion is that if you're going to sell an online course, great, but don't forget about selling packaged experiences, right? The online course is part of something else, right? So that they have online material plus some sort of group engagement plus some sort of personal time with you, whatever that might be. I just think that society is shifting to a place where we want experiences more than we want straight knowledge. Yeah. So if I can help anybody get hyper-focused on the ideal client, understand that client's learning preferences, and then really think about why is it that that client's choosing you, because maybe the delivery model changes from that point.
Super interesting, man. Super interesting. As a marketer, work with all sorts of different coaches who all have a goal, and a lot of them want to sell online courses. That is super duper interesting stuff, especially really knowing your audience, because the mistake a lot of people make in marketing is they go way too, I suppose, blue ocean and red ocean. Do you know these terms? Blue ocean, yep. Red ocean?
For sure.
So for context for anyone else, red ocean is when I always use this analogy of clients being fish, right? But they're not fish. And I always explain, I'm just meaning it in a lovely metaphorical sense. The red ocean being, you've got a lot of fish clients swimming around and a lot of sharks, businesses trying to feed off the same pool of fish. So red ocean, relatively graphic metaphor there. Blue ocean is when you manage to niche yourself down, go down that extra step into an audience like you did. Introverted executive who likes a spiritual side to their learning. That places you into another pool where there's very, very few people swimming around. And so that is really, really smart. A lot of people are not doing that. They're saying, I'm an executive coach. What's different about you? What do you do? I help executives make more money or make more sales. And that's a very, very, very broad. So when people can be so self-aware like you just have to niche down that little extra step, not too far to the point where they're an executive coach for spiritual people who play the piano on Tuesdays. That's a little, maybe you get a couple sales out of that, but that's a really, really cool, man. I want all my clients listening to know what Michael just said is massive. Massive.
Yeah.
Do you on that note, do you do a lot of internet marketing? How are you primarily marketing your book and your services at the moment?
Yeah. So before the book, when I was working on it, I hired a public relations agency based in Arizona to help just do a lot with traditional media to get things out there. I was doing webinars. I was doing a lot of placements in traditional media magazines, publications, interviews via podcast. I mean, there were lots of traditional vehicles that we were using. I was doing daily social posts, a lot with video, material. And then after the book was launched, we were doing, more traditional, like, hey, let's do a book signing. And let's continue this. Let's share, referrals, recommendations, testimonials. And so we tried it like an omni-channel or multi-channel approach to get that all done. And I think it worked really, really well. According to Ingram Spark, the average book in the world sells 1,000 copies in its useful life. And that's a really important statistic to know if you're ever going to think about publishing a book, because you want to know or have reasonable expectations. And so I really look at the book. I don't expect to make a lot of money on the sale of the book. I expect it to increase my value in the marketplace to cover the costs of everything associated with the marketing and with branding, right? That's really important. So I'm very thankful to have tried all those things and done all those things, and to be at this place now where the vast majority of people that come to me, it can come from some of those more traditional omni-channel, but because I'm attempting to deliver a very high level of service, I'm getting a lot of word of mouth referrals now. And I just think there's power in that, right? So as you're working through all these different channels that you're going to share your message, do not forget the value of word of mouth referral, right? We're in kind of the trust-based society now.
Yeah.
And so make that process of word of mouth referral as seamless, as simple as possible, because those are the people who are not going to be interviewing other coaches. If they get that word of mouth referral, they're just going to hire you basically on the spot.
Easiest sell there is, right? A word of mouth referral. Love
Yeah.
them. But you got to deliver. You got to deliver to the first people to start them happening. So that really separates the wheat from the chaff, to speak. You know, who ends up getting referrals. And I'm very blessed. We don't actually have to advertise here at To the Moon Digital, because we get 90% of our clients from referrals, which is great.
Yeah,
really happy. So on the book, man, because I'm reading the book, I'm loving the book, I'm listening to the book, and so it's about helping people find their true purpose. Yeah, and that's a massive topic. And so I've been on a bit of a deep dive, and I've got to backtrack to make this question make sense a little bit this year. So I came from a real personal development background. When I left hospitality and I lost some weight and I got healthy, I just went deep on seminars, courses, yoga, meditation, trying veganism or vegetarianism, or quitting alcohol, quitting coffee, hitting the beach every morning, push-ups, chants, rituals, all sorts of stuff like that. Reading books, journaling. I've done it all. And I was pretty broke the entire time financially, which at the time also didn't help my mental state, because I put a lot of weight on it. When I got into digital marketing, what I do now, it kind of happened by accident that it became a job, and I'm in the best place I've ever been. You know, it's not like I wake up in the morning excited about numbers, and I do enjoy the job, but I don't think that digital marketing is what I was put on this earth to do. I don't think it's my calling. I really, really love it, but I don't think it's my purpose. That doesn't bother me. And so I want to ask kind of a two-part question. One being, do you believe people can have a long, happy, successful life and never truly find their purpose? And two, do you think that maybe some people put too much weight on finding their purpose, and that actually stops them from ever getting out there and taking action?
Okay, so let me see if I can look at this through the lens of, I think the discovery of purpose is not really a deeply meaningful thing to the silent generation, the baby boomer generation, or even like early Gen X. And so I really mean that. And it's just because they were all kind of raised at a time in human history where they were really trying to take care of really basic needs about their life. Like on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they were a little bit lower. And it wasn't until the later group of millennials or Gen Z that the idea of self-esteem and recognition and trying to find self-actualization or the contribution to others for their self-actualization, that really became a big thing. So I think it's a little bit generational in that and I really mean that. So discovery of purpose, I think, is generational, because for 3 or 4 of the generations that exist on Earth today, they have never really thought about it to the same level or depth that later Gen Y or early Gen Z has. So I think it's a little bit contextual based on generation. But then there's also the extra layer of, how do you define success? Because every generation does success differently. Every person does it differently. So we have been taught via the mainstream media, via all these things, that financial success is what we should all be striving for. But through the Harvard study of adult development, they discovered, over an 80-year plus study, they realized that power, money, fame, and traditional financial success wasn't the thing that led to a long, happy, and healthy life, right? So I believe that success is, you have 100% control over where you invest your time. Like that's what I believe it is. Mm-hmm. Now, everybody can have a different perspective on that, but that's just what I believe. So is it possible that if you do not have a purpose, that you can find financial success? Yes, that is absolutely possible. Will you be on a hamster wheel constantly thinking the grass is greener on the other side? Yes, because you'll constantly be delaying happiness, thinking that it's going to come after some sort of accomplishment. And that is not a meaningful life in any context. But if you have your life's purpose and you're very clear on it, you can then denote or come back to for yourself, you can unequivocally know what success means to you. Right. So it's very clear that if you have your purpose, you will then be able to define, and it's going to iterate and change over time. And that's key, is that as society evolves, as Earth evolves, what success means to a person with purpose who has a why, it's going to evolve and change. And I think that's really important. So if somebody has a purpose, they're going to be much more able to find inner peace, clarity, confidence, be patient, be able to trust their intuition. But what they can do better than previous generations is that they have the capacity to surrender the how and remain focused on the why. Okay, that's critical, right? So how you make money, how you find success, how you find peace, all of those things are going to change as time passes and progresses. So Alex, the way that you find that now, especially after having young kids, is different. Okay, it's very, very different, right? So it's just being aware of those things. That the thing that we think about it that almost always holds us back is people put a lot of pressure on themselves because there's an underlying fear that by displaying themselves somehow vulnerably and going for what it is that they really want, they're going to be judged, they're going to be shamed, they're going to be playing small, they're not going to be making their parents happy, fill in the blank, all those things exist there. But I don't really think that purpose for a human being displays itself to someone until they're about 28, 29, 30 years of age. Right. So I think that is when we start to really understand the purpose or the mission of our life. And then after that, you can spend decades of time getting to those deeper levels of meaning. So I think that's kind of a big answer, but it is important to understand is that with your own defined purpose, what you define as success is going to iterate and evolve as time passes and progresses. Right. But it can also be scary to go after that purpose, because there are so many things, there are so many factors from society, from our family, the way they were raised, that stop us from doing things that are in alignment with it, right? Because our parents say we should behave a certain way, society says we should behave in a certain way. But the absolute truth at the end of the day is that you just have to shut off all the noise, and you have to stay hyper-focused on what your purpose, your mission, your why is, because that's a long, happy, and healthy and meaningful life. I mean, really, that's what it is. So it's hard to turn off the noise, but it's the absolute best thing you can do.
Yeah, 100%. That's a really, really cool answer. There's a couple things to unpack from it. One, someone's purpose in life, it doesn't always have to be end world hunger, does it? Or, and racism or whatever. It doesn't have to be a huge world-changing purpose. What are some of the more common purposes that your clients are finding and stuff that you see in your job as a coach?
I think there are many ways that someone can find their purpose. And so my process is one of them, right? There's something called the International Human Design School, where you can plug in some information about your birth and you're going to know what your human design is, what you came to Earth to learn. Or there's an author named Dan Millman who wrote a book called Peaceful Warrior. And he has something called the Life Purpose Calculator. So you plug in your birthday and your purpose comes out. Or if you've ever used the Pattern app, there are many sections inside the Pattern app that can tell you your destiny and some of the things that you're supposed to learn. And I have a process that kind of pulls 5 pieces of data about a person and says, okay, here's what it is that I think is important to you to understand yourself, to define your purpose. And so when I look back at all the clients that I've served, there's not necessarily a theme, if you will. Sometimes it's somebody wants to be a great teacher, somebody wants to be a great parent, somebody wants to, find a way to uplift the underserved. And I think the thing that's really important to understand is that there's no one purpose that's true for a lot of people. All of the 8 billion people on the planet have a unique and defined purpose. And so I try to help them write a 1-sentence statement that's very clear about what it is. Years ago, I had a client who was a chief marketing officer, basically. And he was in this environment that he loved to go camping. And so what he decided to do was to say that his life's purpose was about bringing adventure into the people around him, because when he was camping, he was constantly doing adventures, right? So he wanted to take those adventures from being out of nature and bring them into the workplace. Okay. So that's the thing, is like, it's always these little things that are unique, right? When I was a kid, I was very emotionally suppressed. I was very much a robot inside my family's business. And so it's not a secret now that I help people with authenticity, right? Because I was not allowed to be authentic. So it's important to understand is that the challenges that you had from birth until about age 28, there's a pattern that exists inside those challenges. And around age 28, 29, 30, you overcome the challenge somehow. So the highest and best use, or your purpose, let's say after age 30 until about age 50, because there's another event that'll happen then, that is basically where you can find the most meaning and the most purpose in your life if you help other people overcome the exact same challenge that you overcame yourself, right? That's purpose, right? Helping other people overcome challenges in that way. So grow and develop yourself, help others grow and develop in a way that's meaningful for them. It's going to be a deeply meaningful life.
That's why a lot of coaches get into coaching, right? Because they have a transformation, whether it's a weight loss transformation. That's what got me into nutritional coaching in the first place. For yourself, you've obviously had an enormous, transformation into this beautiful, happy guy you are now. And that's what you're helping people with. And so, but what you said about only really managing to nail this stuff between, after the age of 28, 29, 30, so many coaches out there are 26 and, expecting huge success and impact pretty quickly. You're not 26 anymore. You're not an old man, but do you have anything to say to the coaches in their 20s out there who just want it all to happen now?
It's a very unlikely goal. And I don't mean that in a very bad or contradictory or suppressive way. From birth until about age 28, Earth is designed to just be a place where we learn. We just have experiences. That's really what it is that time frame is supposed to be doing. And so if you expect that you're going to have some enormous level of success, you have to also remember that 99.9% of the various things that are happening in your life, you have no control over. Right? There's a lot of stuff shifting and changing on Earth right now, and that you can't predict, you can't control that. So a better way to look at it is to say, okay, I have these pockets, I have these phases of life where I'm supposed to be learning specific things. And the success isn't so much the accomplishment of having 1 million followers. The success is the growth and development that you've accrued over time that you can then pay forward. So instead of looking at the end result as being the success, look at the intentional growth and development and progress that you made by going through the learning, by going through having different experiences that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And so it's easy when you look at social media to see all these people who are very, influential and have lots and lots of followers, but it's a very artificial synthetic life. Right? There's not a reality to it. And so I'm glad that we're moving to a time in human history where we're getting people to trust their intuition and authentically share their story. And oftentimes we don't even know if we're having an impact on people. Now, I don't know who has read my book, but I have received emails and I have received messages via social media that my book has literally saved people's lives. And I could have never known that. And that is not reflected financially, right? You can buy the book for $7 online. And so the way we make impact nowadays is so radically different that we can't say success is a number of followers, it's X number of dollars of revenue. Success is the impact that you have on others around you.
For an audience of coaches, Michael, I couldn't think of a better place to leave it, man. That is a huge, huge message, and one that I'm trying to learn as I get older. I'm 30 now. I'm half dead. That's it for me. And I think impact and those messages, I'm really, really glad you get those messages, man, because you deserve it. You've been through the ringer, and it's great that you are helping other people to literally save their own lives. So that's fantastic, man. Well done. Congratulations, Michael. You're doing great stuff, man.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that. It's been a gnarly journey, man. Like really. But I know that I came to Earth to go through some of those hard things, to be able to pass on the lessons learned, to give other people just a little bit of hope that there's a very bright future ahead.
Well, you put a smile on my face, man. I'm going to go into the rest of the day feeling fantastic, and you're making me almost want to just close my computer and go to the beach. But, go and live my purpose a little bit more through paddleboarding. One day. It's Friday afternoon here. We're going to be fine. So, your podcast is An Equal Chance to Be Unequal. Mm-hmm. That's a great place to find you. You've got a great website, which we're going to put in the links. Your book,
Yeah.
I know, is on Audible and it's on Amazon. You can read it on your Kindle. You can read it, listen to it. I love listening to it. Michael's got a very, very uplifting tone and voice, even in the difficult parts of the book. So I will finish that this weekend, man. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Michael.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Alex.
No worries. And thank you everyone for listening or watching. I'll be back next week with another episode of Coaches to the Moon.